Thought I'd tell you all a little story about Brian Rutenberg. Uh, when he was younger, well, have to be much younger, um, he was a shy kid, and he didn't do well with girls, and so he was going to go out on a date with this young lady, and he didn't quite know how to conduct himself, and so he asked one of his friends to help him out, and his friend said, "Well, have a nice time. When the evening is over, give her a little kiss on the forehead and tell her that you had a nice time." And so Brian did this and gave her a little kiss and said, I really had a nice time. And she looked at him with dreamy eyes and said, "A little lower, please." and and Brian said, "I had a wonderful evening."
That's good. That's great.
This is my good friend here. You know, I was thinking about what I was going to say about Brian that hasn't already been said myriad times by many people. He is a consummate artist. He has become truly a national entity, and he really knows what he's doing. These paintings are so beautiful, and I've always said that there's not one of them that I couldn't walk into. I still feel that about these paintings. One of the best ones is in his house, and if I'm ever staying there without him around, might disappear. I'm really, this crowd says all I need to say about Brian. So rather than him giving a little lecture, we decided this morning that I'm going to ask him a few questions, and then hopefully all of you will ask him a lot of questions. So I'm going to sit because I need to anyway. So Brian, my first question to you is, what is the square root of 17?
Okay. Lower, please. Like that. Yeah.
Great story, isn't it? Well, can I get that down there? Okay, where do we begin? What is Banner of the Coast?
First of all, thank you all for taking some time out to come out today, and thank you and Mary for everything you've done for me. My greatest blessing in life was being born and raised in South Carolina. And as a kid, Myrtle Beach, where I was born and raised, offered very little in the fine arts. So I had to sort of fend for myself. I didn't know that anyone could be an artist. I didn't know this is what you could do. And I was a shy kid, as you noted. I was gloriously terrible at sports, and I was sloppy. I was the reason that paper towels are on school supply lists. And but what I could do at a very early age was pay attention. And I noticed that something miraculous was happening right in front of my eyes. Myrtle Beach is one place that has two faces. On one hand, it's a resort town with candy-colored blinking lights and all-you-can-eat calabash seafood signs 3 stories tall. And the other half is some of the most haunting landscapes on the East Coast. And all I had to do was pay attention because something was happening in front of me. It was a high-speed collision of 2 landscapes, one natural and one artificial, colliding head-on at 250 miles an hour with such violence that they became a third thing. And that third thing is what I've tried to apprehend in my paintings to this day, to try to capture that thing that explodes out of that collision. So my art education began in the public library at Chapin Memorial Public Library, where my mom would drop me off a couple days a week and I would pour through the art history section. I was about 13 years old, It was the 700s and the Dewey Decimal System. And what I value now as I look back was that experience gave me the gift of misunderstanding. And what I mean by that is when you're too young or not cognitively developed to interpret what you're reading, you start to make stuff up yourself and you start to fill in the blanks yourself. And you take all these little detours that were never intended. I was a 13-year-old numbnuts reading about, synthetic cubism and analytic cubism and Veronese and, Italian mannerism. I had no idea what I was reading about, but I kept going and I kept looking. And I remember my mom would pick me up and she'd say, "Brian, where's your grandma?" And I would say, "She's on the back porch with Grandpa." Okay. And a few years later, as I became a teenager, I developed an interest in the carnival banners that you would see at the state fairs, the amusement parks, and the rides, as we call them, in Myrtle Beach. And what I loved was that these were big, clear, visual presentations of an event. Concise, saturated color, large forms at the periphery, and then gradually getting smaller as you get in toward the focal point of the image. And whether it was the pie eating contest or the human cannonball or the 10 and 1 show, each banner was a visual description, not of what will happen, but of what could happen. And there's a big difference there. My teacher at the College of Charleston, Michael Tyzak, used to always say, "An eye not told what to see sees more." So the notion that that reality had been questioned, re-examined, and improved through exaggeration and ornamentation. And that's what I saw in these carnival banners. And I remember my ever supportive parents got me the name and address of a local artist who lived in Conway who painted the banners. And I wrote him a fan letter, as I like to do. I still write fan letters. And I said, I admire what you're doing, and could I please have your autograph? And that 6 weeks later, I got a letter. And, "Dear Brian, thanks for your note. Unfortunately, I don't give out my signature. Sincerely," and it was signed. Okay. So I graduated at 17 years old, and I had no desire to go anywhere else but Charleston. My parents had a love affair with Charleston ever since we were little kids. We'd go down every couple of months. And at one point, my mom commissioned a local portraitist to do a pastel portrait of myself and my 2 younger brothers. And her name was Alicia Rhett. And she was well-known in Charleston for these pastels, but she was also known as India Wilkes, Ashley Wilkes' sister, in a little kind of unknown film called Gone with the Wind. And she had a pretty sizable role. And I remember going down over a couple of successive weekends, and I would sit for her in this beautiful old antebellum house south of Broad, and watch her. And up to that point, my dad was an attorney and sat in a room full of books. I saw what his job was, but I never knew that this could be a job too. And I saw this little woman behind this beautiful wooden easel with this cream paper and battalions of pastels lined up like the markings of a diamondback snake, and little porcelain cups with chamois skins and blenders and all these tools. And I would ask her questions. "How do you do this? How do you get the rose of my cheek to look like it goes back to my ear by going from rose to green? How do you get the shine in my freshly shampooed hair? How do you get the blue eye, to look moist?" And she would tell me. And then she finished and she said, "Brian, come around here, I'm done." And before thinking, my instinct was to reach out and smudge the eye, the blue eye. And I thought, "Oh my God, she's going to hit me with a polo mallet." And she didn't. And she said, "Brian, I think you're going to be a painter." So, College of Charleston, and I found my people. And in the 4 years I was at the College of Charleston, I never heard the word no once. Every question was answered with the word yes. And that made all the difference to me. So my first art class ever was William Halsey's last.
I'll point out that about 3 years ago, Brian received an honorary doctorate from the College of Charleston and was the commencement speaker. And his 2 children now are students at the College of Charleston. And to make sure that everybody behaves themselves, we have with us the Dean of the Honors System from the College of Charleston, Beth. So she's here to because I can't do it alone. I need some help to keep Brian in line. So, I have all these questions, Brian, and maybe they're. What was that?
Okay.
Your phone?
Yeah.
Does your current environment, living in New York City, how much does that play a part in your work from Low Country Images?
So I've lived and worked in New York City since the day after I graduated from College of Charleston. So May 11th, 1987, I moved to New York May 12th of that year, and have lived there ever since. And it's had a profound impact on the way that I see the world. And even though these are landscape paintings, they very much refer to the human experience of the landscape. So there's a lot of emphasis on verticals and on standing in front of something, looking at it, which is that vertical orientation, you and the horizon line. So if you notice, a lot of the paintings, the light in the paintings is usually issued from the very top, and then it plunges down into darkness. There's a lot of tall, long verticals, which is a reference to my interest in Gothic architecture, but also Manhattan. The notion that light is at such a premium when you walk around the city, you have to look up to see the sky and see what the weather is and all that. There's an enormous rushing energy that usually occurs at the bottom of these paintings, which refers to street life and the subways and all those things. And also the notion of the seasons passing within one painting. I always like to refer to two seasons in the same picture. If you notice on this one, the cooler tones on the top left transfer over to the warmer tones on the top right. And that's to make you feel as if you're standing in December on the left, peering ahead into April on the right. And that's another reference to New York, in which we see the seasons happening at the tips of these skyscrapers above us. So yes, it's had an enormous impact on the way that I construct and compose.
Well, tell us how texture plays such an important part in your work.
I paint the landscape in the same way that I learned how to see it, by lying on my stomach on the ground with my chin in the dirt as a kid. The foreground so up close that I could literally taste it, and the background really far away, and then nothing in between. When you look at the landscape from the ground, from a bug's eye view, the landscape, the middle ground goes away. And I do that very much in my paintings. You'll notice a lot of emphasis on the foreground, and then a very quick jump to the distant background. And that comes from my interest in the Canadian group of 7 painters from the 1920s and 30s, who would often eliminate the middle ground to give the viewer the feeling of being in the direct proximity to the raw power of nature, with nothing in between. It made me think of when we were in school as kids, we used to go to school by carpool. And there was a woman named Miss Williams who would pick us up, and she was terrifying. And I remember I would get in her car, and she'd light up a cigarette and yell at me to roll up the windows because you're letting the smoke out, like that, like that, like that. And I remember her son asked her once, "Mom, was I adopted?" And she said, "Not yet." And then we were studying To Kill a Mockingbird in school. And I remember asking her if she believed in fate. We were talking about the role of fate in life. And I said, "Do you believe in fate, Miss Williams?" And she said, I said, "Do you believe in free will?" And she said, "I don't have a choice." Which I thought, I didn't realize how brilliant that was till much later, like that. And where I'm going with this is that in magic, which is a big interest of mine, stage magic, the secret behind magic is making what you have to do appear like it's what you want to do. So in other words, if I have a wand in this hand and I wave it over this hand, I'm telling you to look at this while I make a move with this hand. So the same thing is true in painting. You have to make what looks extemporaneous, you have to make it look like it's natural and extemporaneous, even though it's highly labored. And that's hard to do, to make something look as if it spontaneously just appeared out of nowhere. But in fact, it's very, very time consuming, and a lot of struggle and trial and error. So that's a big part of the way that I use texture. The reason that I use thick oil paint and texture is not because I like the way it looks, but because it creates a spatial orientation. And what I mean is, thick paint appears closer and thinner paint appears farther away. So it's really that simple. the content in a lot of this work is really driven by how near or far something appears from your face. And I love to boil it down to that very simple premise of surface. I like that thick paint is the truth. It's not a depiction of something. It is the actual fact happening right in front of you. So what you see on the surface is what matters. If you see it, it's meant to be there. It's the truth. If one color passes over another, it really does. It's on top of another color. If I throw oil paint at a canvas, it splats. If I add paint thinner, it runs. It all acts like real things act in the world, with gravity and light and shadow. So I like this sort of topographical, physical paint surface. And it reminds me of something that I read years ago, written by the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. And it's very short, and I committed it to memory. I'll try to recite it for you. Those Greeks, they knew how to live. What is required for that is to stop courageously at the surface, to believe in folds, skin, to adore appearances, the whole Olympus of appearance. Those Greeks were superficial out of profundity. And I think what he's saying there is, at least to me, is that in our constant quest to find meaning in everything, we sometimes overlook reverie. I think he's reminding us that pleasure is itself a form of knowledge. Would you rather have a critic describe sweetness to you in a 10-page essay, or would you rather bite into a warm raspberry-filled Krispy Kreme? That will tell you everything you need to know about sweetness. So that notion of direct experience is, I think, refers to the texture.
He doesn't come to Charlotte for his shows. He comes because there's a Krispy Kreme down the street. Brian, you astonish me. You always do. One thing I wanted to ask you is, what's a typical day like for you in the studio? Or
I love that
typical
question.
Week?
Yeah. I like to talk about that because I have a really strict ritual. So I get up at about 8 in the morning, 8:10, something like that. And the first thing I do is swing my legs out of bed, put them on the floor, and sit up on the edge of the bed. And I sit there. And I don't do anything. I just sit. I make no decisions, and I just wait. And then from muscle memory, when it's right, I just get up and then go in to brush my teeth and shave and everything. But try it, because it's really interesting to not make any decision there. Just sit on the bed and just wait. And eventually you'll get up. And you've not made any decision. You just get up out of ritual. And first thing I do is look in the mirror, and I decide which one of the village people I'm going to be for that day. Okay. I like to use contemporary references. If I'm going to make stuff that day, I'm the construction worker. If I feel like a leader that day, I'm the Native American chief. If I need order, I will be the police officer. If I'm feeling a little bit sleazy, I'm the leather guy. And if I need to just take care of shit, then I'm the army dude. Like that. Then I meet my couple of actor friends. There's 4 of us, and we have oatmeal and coffee at our local diner. And then I go to my studio about 9 o'clock, 9:30. And I do the first hour or so of answering emails or sweeping, just menial tasks. And then I just get to work. And I don't think or plan, I just start.
This guy has breakfast with Richard Kind and Matt Damon. So
yeah. Just a couple little actors like that.
Yeah. Okay, we have so many people here. There's got to be a few questions. Who wants to begin? Somebody, come on. Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Brian. I noticed maybe 3 or 4 paintings here that what to me speaks sun or light. The shape that I've not noticed in paintings before, maybe. And I wanted to know, is that something new? Is it to represent sun or just light? And I don't know, you can even point out the one behind you.
Yes. Yes.
Has a star.
Yeah.
Sun burst.
Yes. Yeah. The question is about specifically that image, that motif that appears in this more recent work, and its reference to heat or sun. And it is those things, very much so. I'm a student of art history, and I look at all periods, specifically Peruvian feather textiles with some of this information.
Oh, wonderful.
And I look at the notion of the symbol of the sun, of the rays, of that beautiful pointy, almost like a weapon, like you'd throw it and it would stick in the wood, that kind of thing. It also refers to sand spurs, and anybody that's grown up in Myrtle Beach or the coast, we used to get them stuck in our toes. Yeah, yeah, those evil little, like, landmines like that. So I like this notion of these this reference to radiance and to heat, and I like to put them up in the corner so that they sort of provoke radiance into the painting. And there's that notion again of light on one side and less light on the other. So a transference of morning to evening, or seasons to seasons. Yes.
You can make reference to the fact that you have a few good moves.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't try to expand beyond it. Would you just talk about that for a second?
The notion of that a painter should have only a limited perspective and only a couple of moves that you perfect over a long period of time. Duke Ellington said that the wise musicians play what they can master. And I believe that a painter, I don't call myself an artist, and I never have. I call myself a failed magician who paints. And that's an important difference, because sneaking the word failed in there takes a lot of pressure off of me. The art world puts an enormous amount of weight on artists, especially in school, to succeed and to win and to begin right out of school or risk mediocrity. Every painting has to be a game changer. And the comedian Steve Martin said, "It's easy to be great, it's hard to be good." Anyone can hit it out of the park now and then, but it's much harder to be consistently good. And that's what I mean by having only a couple of moves that you do, but you perfect them over a long period of time. No one talks about that. How do you get good at something? You just limit it down to one thing or two things, and you work on that over and over and over again. I believe that time, not the market, determines quality. So I think you have to limit your perspective, limit what it is you're trying to do, and define your job description as narrowly as possible. I always ask myself, what is someone's job? If I'm looking at a Hudson River painting in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, yes, they painted beautiful vistas of the American West, but really they were the first conservation movement of America, the first nature conservation movement. Frank Sinatra was a saloon singer. That was his job. Jerry Lewis was a clown. That was his job. The Rolling Stones sell T-shirts. That's their job. Yeah, they make great music, but their money comes from selling T-shirts. And my job is to be a failed magician. So it takes the pressure off. And I was reading the other day when Google was founded, the two founders of Google sat down and they had to have an argument. Are they going to have ads or no ads? And they went back and forth, and the founder who decided on ads won the argument, and they have ads. But it was the other one who lost the argument that said, okay, if we're going to have ads, we're going to make it discreet, tasteful. We're going to let you know it's an ad, and we're going to give you the option to skip it. So in a way, that's what made Google successful, the loser in the argument, not the winner. The winner just had the win, but the loser is the one who had all the ideas. So always better to be never be the smartest person in the room. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Follow-up question. How would you talk about your two moves?
Oh, my two moves.
Like specific paint.
Yes. Yeah. I approach the landscape.
Not the moves with that girl.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you were not very good at that.
No, I was. The two moves, I think, is to boil the landscape down to a few key visual elements. Very often there'll be two sides that have a lot of sort of aggressive stacked twigs and thickets and things that you have to look through. And then it sort of gradually transcends into something more ethereal and thinner toward the center of the image. And that's a way of creating kind of an artificial representation, not of the landscape, but of the image of landscape. And that's a big difference. I'm not really interested in painting or representing the landscape. I'm interested in representing the image of the landscape. And when you go to the image, then it gets really interesting, because you're shooting the natural world through your personal psyche, through all of your memories and quirks and all your idiosyncrasies, and then you're putting it back out. So my moves are those two things, is the way to compose a picture. Almost every one of them has the same thing. And I've never changed, and I see no reason to change. I just want to get more direct. My teacher used to say, what's the least amount of information you can have and still have a painting? Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you. I only found out about you about 3 years ago when you were at the Mint.
Mhm.
And you gave a talk there, and I've followed you ever since. And I follow other artists. But I find that I have sent you like 3 questions, and you are on the spot answering my questions like very promptly, and so many others don't do that. And I want to thank you for that. And I also want to thank you for the outstanding YouTube videos that you do in your studio. And there's a lot of thought and effort into
Thank you.
those, and I really enjoy.
Thank you. I had good teachers, so I'm just doing what I was taught. Thank you. Yes.
Could you talk about the musicality of your painting? Like if one of your paintings were a song, how would you describe it?
About
wow.
the musicality of the paintings. And music has and always and still does plays a very vital role in the way that I see the world and move through the world and compose these pictures. I always have something playing when I'm working, be it chamber music or Miles Davis recently, or it could be bluegrass music or just podcasts. But it becomes like electronic wallpaper to me. It goes away, and it sort of helps me sort of envelop myself in that cocoon that we all create from that interior space. I've always said that the greatest painter of the 20th century wasn't a painter. It was the late Canadian pianist Glenn Gould, who lived from 1932 to 1982. And I have had and still have an obsession with him. And I spent most of the 90s going back and forth from New York City to Toronto, where he lived, worked, and died on the Amtrak. And I never met him. This was in the 90s. So, but I would pour through his entire catalog of notes and outtakes from his videos and recordings. I held his shoes. I look at his blood pressure, numbers and medications. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew that I would know it when I found it. And I was stalking a dead guy, essentially. So that notion of the consummate artist, the philosopher, the man who didn't take himself too seriously, but took his work deadly seriously, and who sort of changed the way that piano music was performed in that he used no pedal at all, and he sat really, really close to the surface, 18 inches from the ground, and had this almost uncanny, almost like an alien from another planet clarity of his music. And if you listen to the Goldberg variations, for instance, the second version, not the first one, you can hear what I mean. You hear him humming in the background, and he would gyrate as he played, almost as if he was in this trance. And I was just obsessed, and still am. And I think he represents that connection to music and to meter and to dynamics and to counterpoint. The idea of many, many threads all coming together, creating this weave of information. And hopefully you'll see that when you look at the paintings. They're very multi-layered and take months and months and months of moods and information and veils of color to create. So I think that's the best musical term I could get.
Someone, please.
I know.
All of your paintings in the past, as you progress, they get brighter. There's one back there that sort of goes back to the 90s, where it's kind of dark and blank.
Mhm.
And that fascinates me more than some of the other ones, because it's almost as if you have to use your imagination or take in that it's something that is obvious.
Yeah. Yes, to counter all the bright color.
Yeah.
The notion of that small painting on the right to the door, the sort of dark, neutral, tertiary passage at the top, very different from a lot of the palette in a lot of these other paintings. And that one comes specifically from a Rembrandt portrait at the Met, the 1661, the old one, which I go back to and have recently in the past week. That's why I'm mentioning it. Not his features, but the background. He was a master at the backgrounds, which he would create, I think, with like magenta and brown and lead white. And he had these beautiful grays that he would come up with, and they were spatial and vaporous. So I wanted to sort of play with that idea of that gray brown, that velvety color. Thank you. Yeah, it's from Rembrandt.
You know that almost matches the carpet.
Yeah, I did, and that too, like that. Yeah, yeah. Jerald sent me a swatch. And I,
It was
yeah.
purposeful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brian,
Yeah.
spoken and written a lot about your formative years as both a young boy growing up in South Carolina and your young years as an emerging artist in New York. So I'm curious now that you're well beyond that and you're a very successful, established artist. How have your turning points changed? Are they as big? Are they more subtle?
The notion of turning points in the trajectory of one's career from beginning to middle, which I am, I guess, now. That's interesting. I had a revelation recently in front of that Rembrandt, which is what took me to that idea. Rembrandt was the original Facebook. He was the intersection of psychology and identity put into visual form. It's Facebook. We see him age from a rosy-cheeked twink to a cocky middle-aged man to the carcass of an old man right before our eyes. And I was looking at it, and I remember thinking, in my 20s and 30s, I cared all the time about what people thought of me. And then in my 40s, I decided, I don't care what people think about me. And now I'm in my 50s, and I realized, no one ever thought about me. So that's the turning points. Those three. Okay.
Someone else? Someone.
One career path changing from
What was the path changing of SVA? So I went to graduate school at School of Visual Arts in New York City, 1987 to 1989. And the reason I went to grad school was to have a soft landing into New York and to be able to be near the Metropolitan Museum of Art and to have a small group of like-minded individuals to sort of, bounce ideas off of. So there were about 28 of us in that class, and there were one or two seminal figures, Gregory Amanoff being one of them, who's still active today, a great painter. And we quickly became really good friends, and he hired me as his studio assistant. I was flat broke. I was doing like 3 jobs at once. And he said, I'll pay you $15 an hour, come stretch these canvases. I babysat his daughter. I picked up his dry cleaning. And I learned the unglamorous underbelly of what we do. It's not pretty. It's sloppy, dirty work. And I don't even call it work because, the plumbing has to go on. Doctors have to go on and stuff. Show business and entertainment, it doesn't, it's vital, but it's not. I don't want to say work because what I do is it is hard work, but it's not hard work like a soldier or a police officer. So I want to clarify that part. But it was those figures, especially Gregory, who sort of let me see what a working artist's life really looks like, and taught me to be generous and grateful. And I had him as a role model. And Michael Tyzak at the College of Charleston was my other face on the Mount Rushmore. He's no longer with us. He was a British painter, and he's like another father to me. And I'll tell you a quick little anecdote about Michael. When it came time to move to New York, I was scared and nervous and excited. And he took me to lunch at Jack's on George Street, which is no longer there. And I ordered grits and scrambled eggs, and Michael ordered toast and tea. And we talked and reminisced about our time together at CFC. And I said, Michael, I'm really scared. I don't know what I'm doing and what to expect. And how do you do this? And I said, you've done this for like 60 years. How does one be an artist? What does it take? And he paused for a minute, and he put his cup down in its sloppy little saucer, and he said, "This is really good toast," which and I was never the same after that. Yeah. It's don't sweat the small stuff. It's everything you need is right in front of you. So that's what I learned from him. Yes, sir.
At what point did you decide to channel your talents, your obvious talents in several fields, toward art rather than comedian art?
No. Yeah.
Or a magician.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure, you find inspiration of your illustration somewhere in your work.
Yeah, yeah.
In light, contrast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the notion of the other things that one does. How did I end up channeling into art? So I said I was a failed magician. I was terrible at the moves. My hands just became like too big to do convincing coin drops and all the other stuff. And my dad was a real lover of stand-up comedy. He used to play Bob Newhart and Albert Brooks and George Carlin, who's a big favorite of mine. So I grew up in a family who really appreciated the quirkiness and the truth that a comic can deliver. And I just had good teachers. So
This is what you can do through your art as well in some form.
you hopefully, a painter is a lot like a stand-up comic. You stand naked on stage and you try to tell the truth. So that's what I try to do. Thank you. Okay. There's somebody else. Yes.
You said it takes months
Yeah.
to complete one piece.
Yeah.
Do you often have multiple pieces going at the same time?
Oh, yeah.
Work on
Yeah.
one piece at a time?
Yes. So in terms of the scope of time it takes to make the work, I generally schedule 2 solo shows per year, and it takes me about 8 months to make one show. And I generally have about 12 paintings per show. So I only work on a single show at a time, and I have a pretty big studio, about the size of that front room there. And I'm able to lay out a lot of paintings, 12 or so, around the room, and I rotate them.
Flat?
No, I work on the wall. Yeah, sometimes flat, but mostly on the wall. And it allows me to problem solve. If the purple in this painting is not working, I'll stop and I'll go to the next one, and maybe it will work in that one. It also is practical because oil paint, especially this heavy, dries very slowly. New York is quite humid, which some people don't realize, and it dries really slowly. So it's a practical thing as well. So hopefully after 8 months, I've got a cohesive, chromatically, concise body of work. That's the process. Yeah. Yes.
I'm curious what brand of oil paint has the distinction of having you as a client?
Yeah. Now, what brand of oil paint? I like Gamblin a lot, and he's a good friend of mine, Robert Gamblin. And I've been in his ads before, and he did a series of student grade paints called 1984, and I'm the box. I'm the cover of the box. And so I got a lot of merch from that trade like that. Yeah. I like for some colors like whites and raw umber and some of the ochre colors. I like Winsor Newton, some of the more inexpensive pigments as well. And then for some of the special colors, the magentas, the dioxazine purples, I'll use a color like Old Holland, which is much more expensive, but much more color fast and richer, and will go a longer way when you dilute it with mediums, or you tint it with white. So mostly Gamblin.
Mark, do you varnish are these varnished?
Are these varnished? Mostly not. I tend to use a combination of Galkid medium, which is a Gamblin product. It's a liquid alkyd resin, and it's fairly shiny. And I'll add to that a little bit of walnut oil, which slows the drying time and is also a little bit shiny. And I'll often mix that into the paint in the process, so that when it's finished, it'll maintain that juicy, just freshly painted feeling. And then a lot of other areas I'll buff down to more of a matte finish. So there's a combination of shiny and matte, which is a nice effect, I think.
Brian's going to be here for a while. All of you take opportunity to speak with him. And I thank all of you. This is an incredible turnout. And it has everything to do with this gentleman. I can't tell you how proud I am to be able to represent this man and his work. And enjoy your day, everyone. Stay for a while, have another cup of coffee, and chat with Brian. Thank you.
Thank you.